Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 456. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me I have a special guest today again, Kripa. Kripa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Great. Thanks for being on the show. John had an important executive meeting that he had to do, so I don't think we're going to get a color of the bay, but if I were to predict what a color of the bay is, I would say that it is probably light blue because it's been really warm. We've had a high pressure system flowed into California now. We're going to be in drought land here if we don't get some rain one of these months, but it is beautiful weather in California, and so I'm very, very, very happy to be here in California. But we won't be here for long because we will be traveling to Barcelona come Friday for VMworld Europe, so very, very excited about that. On the show today we have Boskey Savla. Savla?
Yep.
Yeah, pretty good. She's in the studio today too. So hi everybody out on Facebook. Thanks for watching as always. We're live streaming on Facebook and we're audioing on TalkShow as always. So today we're going to be talking to Boskey about Service Mesh. So she's a product line manager for cloud native apps here at VMware. So we'll get to Boskey in a little bit, but before we do that, we'll just touch base on some news. I have some items. I don't know if you have any, Kripa, but
I don't.
I know you're going to tell us a little bit about the hackathon, right?
Oh,
you can
yes.
give us
Happily.
that one. We're excited about what's going to be happening in Europe as we head over there. But news. So I thought there was a couple of worthy news items that I would like to touch base on. One is Red Hat and IBM. So IBM, obviously, unless you've been in a closet, you've heard that IBM has bought Red Hat. I think that's an interesting move, and the reason I'm bringing it up on news is that I just want to give you my opinion, which I have been saying all along that the hybrid data center is here, hybrid cloud is here. You have hybridity going around, and some of the big players now have to readjust what it means to be in the computer business, right? Be in the software business, be in the data center business. And if you're in the data center consulting business, you better have some software to be consulting on top of, right? Because consulting around hardware and infrastructure buyout, that's going to go away, folks, or it's starting to go away. It's going to be declining. So if you're an IBM where a lot of your revenue is coming from running big data centers, then I think that's one of the things that's going to, downward trend. What's upward trending is obviously, big data centers. So I listened to Larry Ellison talk a little bit about it, right? And he's like, yeah, look, there's a lot of money to be made. All of the cloud businesses, when you go on Amazon or you go on Azure, they're going to be running on Oracle databases, right? So even Larry Ellison is kind of like, hey, we're going to be supporting our software in the clouds, in hybrid clouds, everywhere. And I think IBM was sitting outside going, hey, we've been making all this money helping people build data centers and operate data centers. But we don't have any big brand software here. And we work with them, they support VMware and VMware's products. But as we go into cloud, what's their value? So them buying Red Hat is basically, validating this strategy that you need to have software, and software can be run anywhere and bought anywhere, and the apps that run on top of that can be bought anywhere, run anywhere, which is kind of where VMware has been going when we talk about cloud native, when we talk about hybrid cloud, where we talk about multi-cloud environments. Our software can be purchased and run in a multi-cloud environment. That's where the industry's going. Welcome to the world. Hey, IBM. I think it was a brilliant purchase, personally. I think anybody that can come in and you've got enough money to pay $34 billion for something like Red Hat, that was a smart move because it makes you relevant in a multi-cloud environment, and they really didn't have much to offer there with their guys in white shirts and suits. So excited about that, and I know that everybody. I got friends that work at Red Hat, so welcome to IBM. But I think it's all about services and applications running anywhere, and IBM has now a piece of that business. So good for them. Good move. Right, with that one, I'll talk about dark dark mode on Apple. I got to give Apple credit. I finally got to an Apple store. I've been avoiding their new OSs like the plague. I haven't liked anything they've done in probably 5 or 6 years, but they finally have now dark mode in their latest OS, which I finally got to look at, and thank God I can actually use that operating system again because it doesn't blind me looking at it. So I know I've complained on podcasts before about dark mode, and I was wondering what OS I was going to go to. Was I going to go to Windows and Linux? And I actually have a Windows box now I've been using. So now that I've seen dark mode again, I might end up back in the Apple camp yet again. So thought I would just share that with everybody. And then last but not least, Raspberry Pis. I tweeted out that we've got sensors. We're going to be at VMworld Europe. We have everybody that's got Makerspace. We've asked for people to send me their email address. We're pre-provisioning them on Wavefront. If you're interested in Wavefront and you'd like to be provisioned for a free Wavefront account, you can send me email, enielsen, ENIELSEN at VMware.com, and I will put you on a spreadsheet that we're inviting people to Wavefront, free Wavefront trials, to be able to do the Makerspace labs. So I've gotten about 30 or 40 people to send me in their email addresses, and we're making accounts. Everybody should have got their Wavefront accounts pre-populated. If you're going to be in Europe or you just want to use Wavefront, you can send me that. We'll get you on that list. You'll get a Wavefront account. And then we are doing Raspberry Pis at the Makerspace tables again. Those are, I believe, sold out. We'll have some drop-in capability for the lab. So if you're interested in configuring Leota on Raspberry Pis, as well as connecting sensors, we have the barometric pressure sensors that are going to be there. We'll pull that data in and then upload that to AWS Wavefront, and then you can visualize that. So those labs are going. Thank you for everybody that sent in their email addresses. I've added you. You should have gotten your invites to that today. My concern is that we have 100 and some plus people on the labs, and I've only had about 40 or 35, 40 email addresses. So there's going to be another 50 people that are going to have to do that on site. I understand that. We'll be ready for that. But if you can send it early, Bill Roth will get you set up on that account. So looking forward to that. And then look at my Twitter if you want to see some of the sensors. We are going to be also at AWS. We got the booth signed. We got the booth built out. V Brownbag's going to be there. We've got community sessions. We have a couple slots left for community sessions that we can slot you in if you're going to be at AWS reInvent. We're going to be at the Aria Hotel in the Makerspace. We've got a nice looking booth coming together. I think we have like 40 plus sessions that are going to be happening, and I started ordering the super cool sensors. We've been getting those in. They're really neat sensors. Motion sensors to audio. Bounce out audio, get the audio back in. So a lot of work on the sensor stuff we've been building out. I think we'll have a couple thousand sensors to give away, maybe 300 of each type, and we'll have 10 different types. So 2,000 or 3,000 sensors, depending on how well Amazon delivers them to us in various states. Some pins are soldered, some aren't. So we're putting that all together. Should be fun at AWS reInvent at the end of November in Vegas. If you're going to be there, you definitely want to come by, say hello to us. Alistair Cook's going to be there. We're going to have community sessions. We're going to have code sessions, power sessions, like 40 or 50 sessions with Makerspace tables, and we do definitely have the coffee bar again at AWS, so that should be fun. I think that's all I got for the news, unless anybody else. Corey, I know that we're talking about vExpert soon, but we're not ready to make the announcement of when that's going to be, but we'll get that going. The vExpert party, I think, is sold out, so we'll be there for the vExpert party. I'm just ticking through things. The hackathon, do you want to mention about the hackathon before we get to
sure.
Boskey, our guest?
Well, Boskey is actually one of our judges for the hackathon, so if you're looking for someone to bribe, she's right here.
And there you go, right?
All right. But Hackathon is completely full on registration. I think about half the people are signed up on Hacker Earth. So if you haven't done that yet, there's a lot of people that have put in awesome ideas for projects and are looking for people to join their team. So there's a bunch of options out there. So just definitely look at Hacker Earth and sign up for a team.
And I know that we ordered some prizes, Raspberry Pis, code jackets, and some other stuff,
give
right?
It all away.
Yeah, give it all away. So we will have prizes, and we're dual tracking the prizes from the people that worked 30 days ahead of time versus the people people that just show up. So we'll kind of do a blend of the hackathon. And I get that. So that was the feedback we got from the U.S. hackathon. We did do a file for tickets, file paperwork to see if we can get some executives there.
Yeah, we
so
did.
Possibly
So
we'll have
to-
some executives to come hang out. I know Ray Fail came last year, so we have done that submission. See if we get some people there. And I think I saw on the purchase order that I signed that there were going to be some transportation.
Yeah, there is. They're picking everyone up from the Fear Grand at 6:30, and so we'll be at the venue at 7, and they're going to drop off at midnight at Plaza Catalunya and Plaza España. So there's 2 different drop-off points based on wherever you're staying.
Right.
So.
Excellent. So, and I got to say, Kripa, I didn't agree to pay for that, but I saw it got snuck in there, and so I signed it anyway, begrudgingly, going, I'm buying buses yet again, right? Which is it's nice because the taxi lines at the Fura is like miserable. So the reason you get buses is that nobody has to wait in taxi lines.
Some news I found out today that Uber is running in Barcelona again.
Oh,
and,
nice.
You can set up, if you have a corporate card, you can set it up to Business Uber. They have it on source for VMware, and it automatically sends your expenses to Concur. So if you're going to Barcelona and you want to
so
help
one
with
more
that.
tip there. There's another local app called My Taxi. If you
Cool.
want to get around like Uber style within Barcelona, that's a good app. The only challenge would be if you can speak Spanish. I mean, a lot of the communication, like where am I, where are you, versus so. But it's a good app. It worked for me last year and the year before that. So
Good to know, because I'm kind of I'm close to the convention center, but far from the center. So, but I think my Spanish is okay. So we'll see how I fare.
All right. Any other news? Like we got Hackathon, the VXpert party, as is at a bar. No buses for that one, so you're going to have to get there. Pat declined, so sorry. It'll just be us and the food and the alcohol, but I think we'll have a good time with that.
Sounds like a good time.
Our team will be there. Corey is not going to make it, so it'll be me and you and everybody listening. If you're going to be there, it should be a good party there. I haven't heard who the guest is. I don't know if we've talked about who the band or guest is for the party on Wednesday.
It's the Cooks,
Is it the Cooks?
like Kooks.
All right.
I don't know. I think they're performing.
We're not allowed to put that on social, so please don't put it on social. I get yelled at if you put it out on social. But we're talking about it here, so that should be good. And so it should be good. We're going to be there on Sunday, and I know that the place and the community booth will be open on Monday.
Yep.
So we'll be hanging out there. I don't think all services. I don't think we're running the Makerspace sessions until Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But we will be in the booth on Monday hanging out. And so the Bogger Tails will be open, and I don't think V Brown Bag starts on the power session start till Tuesday as well.
Yeah.
But the booth will be open and we'll be there. So that's it. We'll move on, and we get to talk about the main subject for today, which is Service Mesh with Boskey. So, Boskey, we always do this. So when you're on the show, tell us a little bit about how you ended up here, where'd you go to university, anything you want to tell us about yourself. We'll transition to what do you do at VMware, and then we'll get into the topic.
Sure. So I'll start from the beginning. I was actually an engineering major in computer science,
Yay.
telecom, and I started off as a Linux system admin. So
As I did. Nice.
A lot of Linux system admin work, which I enjoyed thoroughly. Got involved a lot into open source right off the career. Like I had my first boss who was so crazy about open source and Linux, and I kind of got that from him a lot. And since then, I moved on to doing kind of system engineering, plus I worked with EMC for their storage elements, then came to VMware from there to work on virtualization. I was initially part of the Alliances group that did, kind of the P2V conversions back then in like 2011. Worked there a couple of years, and then I think moved to Kubernetes and in general cloud native applications since a year now. Just trying to blend everything, like all the way from infrastructure, Linux, storage, virtualization to this new era where all of that is abstracted away, right?
Yeah. It is amazing that we've gone from that same journey up through administration to then all the way up into abstracting the app out from platforms, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So neat. So you've been at VMware. How many years did you say there?
7 years now.
7, yeah. So it's a good career run. You live in the Bay Area, work in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
Nice.
Right.
All right.
South Bay.
All right. So you get the nice weather we've been having. Well, good. So now you're here. You're spending time in the app space, right? And we've been doing VMware Code, right? Code events, and it's interesting because the industry is focused on that now. So you come up from a practitioner where you just had to worry about managing compute resources and virtualizing compute to virtualizing storage to virtualizing network to now really climbing up that stack to just the app, and now the app starts virtualizing, and really it's like where you start looking at the topic of today, which is service mesh, right? Where you're really just picking apart the app, and the app is just floating on a service layer, right? So maybe you should just introduce us, because we've had you did a PowerShell session in US. Are you going to do a PowerShell session in Europe or on service mesh? And I think a lot of people don't even know what it is, right? When you're talking admin. So why don't you take us into the top level of what is service mesh really? What does that look like?
So I think service mesh is generally, if you ask 10 people, they'll give you like 10 different definitions, but it's mostly commonly around the idea that, when modern applications or cloud native applications, right, when they run on a platform like Kubernetes or any other container orchestration system, these container orchestration systems call different parts of application services, essentially. And the whole idea is if you're running an application within containers orchestrated by Kubernetes, you end up having microservices, or basically a deconstructed application. And when you run a deconstructed application, it's easier to manage, update, patch, things like that. But then it again brings around a new set of problems, like, what's going on within these different services? How do I make sure that, they are supposed to talk to each other or not supposed to talk to each other, and things like that? So the concept of a service mesh is when you have an application that's deconstructed into multiple microservices, how do I make sure that I have a control plane that kind of understands what's going on within these different services? How do I get observability? How do I push policies across these microservices and things like that? So managing a microservices with observability, with policies, with access control is essentially managing a service mesh.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's funny because I come from Sun Microsystems, and back in the, I don't know, I date myself, maybe it was 91 when I went to Sun. The big thing was DOE. I think it was DOE, distributed objects everywhere, right? And what they and in a real sense, it's the same attack at this, right? Which and I looked at VMware when Sun was playing with kind of virtualization, right? They tried to do it at the app layer, right? And we had app control, and we bought a couple of companies to try to manage the app. And VMware came in and didn't do that, right? So while Sun was trying to manage the app components, right? VMware came in and went, no, we'll just virtualize the whole machine, right? And so and that was more successful because it was you could do it. Right. Where when you start trying to build, apps and DOE, which is distributed objects everywhere back in the Sun days in 91, the problem was the orchestration, right? Trying to keep track of everything and make it all work, right? Where you're trying to build, a management framework to manage all the things, and then the contracts between the objects, right? You have to have stability between the interfaces, right? And eventually I think it didn't work because it was just hard. It was just too hard to do, right? So now we virtualized everything. We virtualized the whole data plane. Now we come up the stack and we attempt to do it again, right?
Yeah.
Which is
I think That was more like a top-down approach, and VMware
Right.
took a bottom-up approach.
Right.
Both were needed somewhere. The challenge is if you just have a distributed app architecture, how do you ensure that your infrastructure is moving at that pace, or they're scaling at that pace, or it's handling constructs that like for example, with Kubernetes or even any other orchestration system, right? It has made infrastructure a lot more fluid. I think virtualization helped a lot. Like, I don't have to worry about, like setting up a new server for a new application, right?
Right.
So it helped there, but then once I get into my application area, what do I do with, like, what if I want to create a load balancer, right? Just to balance my application workload.
Right.
And it didn't
Yeah.
really tie it
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
So I think that this is now where both these realms are trying to
come
blend.
together,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that a lot of the policy and management strategies we built for managing your SDDC layer are now in place, and we kind of know how to do this, and so coming up that stack and going, okay, now we can manage app components in this same way is reasonable. So when we start looking at a service mesh, then it really is almost like a management strategy and management framework model. Who is producing what in this space, right? Like, how are people doing this today?
Yeah, so service mesh, I think conceptually that's what that is. And honestly, there are a lot of open source projects that attempt to address a service mesh. Istio being the most popular out of them. This Istio was founded with Google and IBM. Actually, was one of the like the early founders for Istio.
Right.
And
it's
ISTIO.
ISTIO.
Yeah.
ISTIO.
Yep.
Istio.
It just had a release 1.03 like a couple of days ago, so it's pretty early itself.
Okay. Right.
But that's one of the more prominent solutions that you hear out there. Istio in general works with another open source project called Envoy. Envoy is essentially like, you can think about it as a data plane versus Istio being the control plane, where Istio gets to understand what's going on with Envoy. And Envoy is essentially a project that sits right next to your applications within Kubernetes pods, things like that, where it's listening to everything that's happening and reporting it back to Istio. And then Istio, because it understands what's going on, it will push policies and you can do whatever at that point in time.
Okay.
And there are other projects as well, like Ambassador, and I think Envoy was started by Lyft at some point, and now it's completely like it's under the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is under the Linux Foundation. So there are a bunch of open source projects around that. From a commercial point of view, I think Google Kubernetes Engine has started offering Istio, our service mesh. They announced it during Google Next. So that's the only offering I feel right now is, and again, it's completely based on Istio.
Right. We're getting audio cutting in and out. And I'm not sure why.
It's kind of perfect for me.
Yeah, it's good for
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
me too.
All right, we're just checking here. Yeah. Sounds good here. We're on Wi-Fi, guest Wi-Fi. Don't know. Corey, are you hearing us and are we cutting in and out?
Really sporadically, it does. It's not really a big issue though. I mean, it's really low. It's fine.
Okay. I don't know. We're getting it in our headphones a little bit of that, but I think that's just headphone jack issue, right? Where we get one ear, next ear, that's jack issue. You're getting fine on. All right. Well, we'll keep going and see if it gets better. Sometime Wi-Fi plays games. Maybe I can. Let me see if I can. Oh, all right. I might solve the problem here. I have Wavefront open, and I might have had just too many tabs open on my Mac. We'll see if this helps. All right, we'll keep going. Let's see if that, yeah, I'm getting odd headphone stuff, but that might be there. Okay, Graham, we'll see if we got better for you. All right. Where were we?
Istio.
Oh, that's right. So a question I had for you on that, right, which is, what is VMware's play in this now, right? Because obviously we have a Kubernetes engine, we have a couple different, we have Pivotal, we have ourselves, we have a web service on Amazon, it's for KVE. What is our play in the management stack as we go up this? Obviously, you mentioned that IBM has a play. What are we doing when it comes to this space?
Yeah, so I think there are two different ways VMware is addressing, right? So one is definitely all our core offerings like PKS or VKE that are around Kubernetes. Every product or a service within cloud native applications from VMware is the fundamental thinking is we need to provide Kubernetes that is completely conformant, or it's mostly ecosystem or native to what you would get if you just pulled Kubernetes off of the open source project.
Right.
And with that, that's very important because when somebody goes and takes Istio today and they deploy it in a Kubernetes cluster created by PKS or with VKE,
right.
They get that same ecosystem experience. So it's really from a VMware perspective, that's really trying to give you a vanilla K8s
right.
as much as possible. So,
right.
but at least at the same time secure, so that you could just deploy Istio on that. And Istio really doesn't see the underlying infrastructure elements, so it doesn't matter whether it's running on AWS, whether it's running on vSphere. It really talks to the Kubernetes API.
Yeah, as long as you have API contract stability,
Yep.
then
Yep.
it just should be a vanilla
Yep.
Kubernetes interface.
And the other thing I think VMware is trying to do is we're contributing back to the open source project itself. So we have engineering within VMware that's focused on making Istio project better. We have customers that work on Istio and I would like to deploy Istio, and they have use cases. And if we see that, there's anything that we need to improve on as an open source project itself, then we have engineering focused on that as well.
So, okay, that's a solid answer, right? Which is we're in the business of providing some open source components back to that. We're also here to propagate our Kubernetes solutions on top of the entire stack, which actually can run on cloud native. It runs on vSphere infrastructure, can run on AWS, etc. So got that. Climbing up a little bit. I know Google, some of the guys like Netflix, and now Lyft or Uber. Some of these big super high tech firms. Yeah, it's nice. Those are all Silicon Valley, grade A, well funded. They can build whatever they want. If they want to glue a CPU together and make their own motherboards like Google does, right? Put them in racks and then build a framework. But when we're talking about, we step back to enterprise IT now, right, and enterprise solutions. Do you see some of the standard enterprise people starting to look at building their apps this way, right? I mean, how popular is this? I get it's popular in Silicon Valley proper, right?
Yeah.
But how do you see this starting to bleed its way out into enterprise applications?
Yeah, I think enterprise applications, they are slow in terms of going to this new approach of distributed architecture. You do see, people, there's a general sense that, people understand the value of all these newer way of developing applications and architecting applications using the cloud native formats. But definitely, enterprises applications have been here since years, and they have, businesses running on them. But at the same time, people do see or feel a need to move to a faster model where you could apply changes easily. And some of the people that at least we interact with, what they're trying to do is not necessarily completely go in on this, but they're taking pieces of their app that are easy to port to this kind of architecture. So compared to a Lyft or an Uber or a Google, you might not see a complete 100% in on that architecture.
Right.
But what folks do is, for example, they will take their front end, which is really, a Java app or something like that, and
Right.
that's much more easier. First of all, I mean, even when before you get to service meshes, right, you need to understand that service meshes really apply when you have containerized your application already.
Right.
And even
Right.
once
Yeah.
you have containerized, you really then are working with orchestration tool to orchestrate your
Yeah.
containers. So
Right.
it's multiple steps of approach. So, but at least that's one area where we see people they're containerizing their existing JBoss
Right.
applications, and then they're moving them to containers. And once they have it over there, definitely they're thinking, okay, now, because this is a natural issue. Once you run into your containers or containerized applications, this is something that's naturally like, okay, now I have, it's very similar to what virtual machines did. You definitely gave a lot more advantage to operations, but once you have 50 or 100 virtual machines running on different ESXi hosts, you're suddenly thinking, oh my God, I need a vCenter to manage all this. Otherwise,
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen. So this is going to be a natural, phase where once people start moving into containers or containerizing their applications, they'll see this happening, right? Now I need to take care. And I think Service Mesh really helps. So one thing is definitely it helps you manage your traffic between these different services. But the other thing that Service Mesh does is it also helps you kind of manipulate, if I may say, the traffic coming in. Like I can say 50% traffic should go to this data center versus 50% to that one, or I can say, okay, geographically, if it's coming from the US, push it to this data center. If it's coming from UK, push it to that data center. Or it could be user-based, right? If a specific user logs in, 5% of that user base should be pushed to this web page, right? So I'm suddenly looking at Amazon.com and I'm thinking, oh, those reviews are not really looking the same if you log in, right?
Right.
So
right.
yeah, from an enterprise perspective, yeah, definitely it's not going to be a very very hands-on. I think it's going to
Right.
be time-bound. It will
Right.
will be a slow process. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that to even contribute to this dialogue on is it going to end up in the enterprise? On the chat, somebody's like, does anyone know any K8s or Docker in real enterprises, et cetera? And what I would say there is. Yeah, what we saw, I know a year or two ago when I was in some sales meetings, right, and we were talking about, sales opportunities, ELAs, where are we going, what's our threats. There was definitely customer use cases where we were in competitive deals, right, where they were multi-million-dollar ELA
Yeah.
deals, where customers were, they weren't doing it today, so you don't see it in IT practitioner land.
Yeah.
If you're coming in every day and you're working with your director of IT and you're managing your VMs and all that, you're not going to probably be in those discussions that the CIOs and CTOs were coming into VMware having dialogue around next generation infrastructure, where they were looking at another $10 million deal and they were considering new ways to build their apps, and the CTO CIOs were in those conversations talking about where they were going. So less about what they were maintaining and what they were operating today, and more about big purchases and big bets for their direction for IT technology, as well as developer technology and application technology. And that's where you start to see, containers being relevant, right, in those conversations, and how are they managing their next generation frameworks that do this. And so you're right, I haven't seen it in the wild deployed, other than in some of the top tier Silicon Valley type companies. But there were definitely some big names in those deal assessments that were having the dialogue to determine where they wanted to get. and understood where they, that this was going to impact them?
Yeah, so I think there are definitely enterprises, but it's really a cultural thing, right? All of
Right.
this boils down to culture, like where the enterprise users are in their adoption of containers, or whether even they think about it, or whether they want to modernize or change or
Right.
move to this more agile, moment. But definitely we do see that, like, at VMworld US, Sanjay Poonen was talking to some of the customers that were already running PKS, right? So Bank of Jamaica, for example, they have been a long-term VMware customer, and now they're starting to use PKS. So yes, you do see fragments and pieces, but definitely from where VMware's customer base comes in, it's going to be a while before we move to full force on all this, right?
Right. So you mentioned IBM as big players in the open source work on the service mesh management framework, right? Which seems like it's mostly open source, right?
Yeah.
Between Kubernetes, which is open source, and then you have companies like us who jump in and deliver a managed service or or software that you can install,
Yeah.
and then we do support just like Red Hat or others do, where you take the open source projects and you release that. So we're there on Kubernetes. IBM sounds like they're around. Who else are big players in this space?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things is Google, IBM were the creators of Istio and Service Mesh to begin with. So
Right.
they themselves, we are trying to get, contributing back to the community as much as possible. Like Lyft has been a big proponent of Envoy, like every open source conference that you go to, and anything about cloud native, you'll definitely see Envoy and Lyft presence over there. Netflix OS has been
Right.
big. Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's the big Silicon Valley software companies themselves that are pushing the tech, not the platform, not the traditional Microsoft, IBM. It is actually the customers that are building these native apps, right, on top of Linux and on top of open source solutions.
Yeah, I
right?
think, and what the reason is, if you think about all these different companies like Lyft or Uber or Netflix or Google, they all have one thing that's common is they all run, web scale front ends, right? Like if you go to
Right.
Netflix today, it's worldwide people start using it. So they definitely felt these common challenges to resolve some of these issues, and
Right.
when there was
Large scale.
very
Yeah.
large scale, yeah, and they're like, okay, data definitely is a problem even today. Like, how do you access data around the globe with bits but even before you get to data, all of these companies have these massive mobile cell phone users talking to their either front end or back end, going to Netflix.com, streaming videos and things like that. So they definitely felt a need to develop something like this, a
Right.
distributed architecture, and that's probably why. That's my theory. Is like these companies need to operate at that scale, that their businesses are basically built around this model, right?
Right. Yeah, it is interesting that I don't completely fully understand the architecture and how you can manage traffic, at the front end back into your services, right, in your service mesh, right, like how they're doing that management of traffic, because you actually have to then get into load balancers or that whole thing and manage that whole framework. So interesting to learn a little bit more on how all that management framework plugs in and does that. But that's for a whole other show probably.
Yeah, but just like if I could summarize real quick, like, so I think that's where a lot of the orchestration tools like Kubernetes come in. For example, when you deploy an application in a container and you orchestrate that using Kubernetes really has plugs to understand to the backend infrastructure. So for example, if you deploy Kubernetes on vSphere and NSXT and you want to load balance a service, Kubernetes understands how to spin up a load balancer in NSXT.
Right.
To
Okay. Right.
cater
And
to
to
that.
manage that, and then manage
Yeah.
the traffic delivery.
Yeah. So and then when you talk about service mesh and Istio, really, Istio puts its own ingress gateway, which is essentially a load balancer type, and it will push traffic to the different pods within Kubernetes from that point onward. But essentially, the point I'm trying to make is Kubernetes understands infrastructure elements, what is a load balancer, how to
Right.
spin it up, and things
Right.
like that, and that's what makes all of this much more easier.
Right. Okay. That would be the pieces that
Yep.
I've never spent time with. Right. So interesting framework. What are you guys doing in cloud native for next year? I always I look at we have 10 minutes left, top of the hour. We did get a 10 minutes late start. So, but if you're looking at kind of what you guys are trying to do next year, what are some of your main objectives with regard to cloud native applications and getting people trained? I mean, I look at the code challenge. I'll just give you an example. We look at code, and our whole objective to code is to bring the IT practitioner up to speed with kind of DevOps and automation and the vocabulary needed to work with, the engineers that are actually looking at building out frameworks to consume compute resources in this different model. So our goal to code is just to educate people, right? Bring it up to speed. We're not trying to get people to move. We're just looking at, here are all the things that we do. Here are all the terms and things. What do you guys look at? What are your objectives for next year when it comes to where you're trying to do with your product set, that kind of thing?
I think from what I see, talking with different product managers and the internal marketing folks at CNA, we definitely feel like there's a need to kind of there are questions with our current customer base, like, okay, even if I have to get started, where can I start, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are trying to address that in multiple ways. We have workshops running, we have like a roadshow going on around the globe that help existing customers on how to onboard with all of this. We have a lot of blog articles, white papers that we kind of describe, like, why do you need this? Like, if you just Google like Kubernetes in 5 minutes, you'll see
Right.
a great YouTube video by Steve Tegler and around that. And the other thing is, we are also trying to build an ecosystem. If you look at, for example, VMware Code, for example, right, a lot of the community around today is focused on really SDKs with VMware products, and then how can you, automate a task using them, right? And what we're trying to do is push some common code where, if, for example, somebody wants to run an Elastic search engine, which is like the Google for on-prem,
Right.
with containers, how do you do that? So we kind of have a small, manuscript around that, and we'll try to push it to code.
Right.
That's the kind of things that we are trying
So
to do.
it's kind of
Ecosystem,
education at the app building level, right? How do I get involved? Where do I start?
Yeah.
It reminds me of we built, I forget what the site was called, but it was basically teaching you how to virtualize in the enterprise, right? Back in the day in 2007, when I came here, we spent a lot of time just kind of taking people through the journey, right?
Yeah.
And what are the stages to virtualization? Where are you at stage 1? Where are you in stage 2? So it's kind of like the same kind of thing for building cloud native apps, right?
Yeah.
Is that how to begin the learning process, understand the value prop, and then what would you do at the beginning of this maturity stage? What is the second stage? What are the third stage for that journey?
Yeah. And I mean, so there was the first time, I think, for this year's VMworld, we did this workshop, which was more like a 5-hour thing where, okay, you don't understand Kubernetes, you don't understand containers, you have no idea what that is, and how do you at least understand that? And, we went through like 200 users actually. They were logged in, they connected to VKE, they were pushing applications in Kubernetes, and it's all online. If you even GitHub, search for that, you'll
Right.
find it. But we are running same thing in EU, and I think one of the things that we saw in there is the workshop ran a repeat session on Thursday in VMworld US, and it was the last day of the show, and it was probably the last hour of the show, but there were still people there, and there was the need to understand this was so high, and we felt like, maybe we should do a lot more of that, right?
Right.
So that's what we are trying to target next, is making sure that we kind of run these kind of sessions more often versus just doing VMworld.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that we do the meetups, and it is a constant topic that we try to touch base with. So yeah, and it I think it is coming. I think that more and more as apps are built, maybe we'll see 20-30% of workloads start to shift into this model, right?
Yeah.
And then if we start to talking about where it runs and AWS and our service versus on-prem and how do you connect these, and do the management frameworks care where the stuff is running, right? Can it be hybrid? Does this stuff work from a hybrid perspective?
Yeah. So that's the good thing about this, right? The abstraction layers are so high above infrastructure that it doesn't really matter. In fact, for example, if with Envoy, it doesn't even really matter what platform is orchestrating your containers, whether it's Kubernetes or Mesos or something else, right? So the best thing about all of this is we are so far away from infrastructure that it's very transparent, right, at that point.
Right. Just reminds me of open source Linux, the whole stack, the whole thing migrating up into virtualization layer, and now at the app, it's going to be all virtualized at the app layer and Kubernetes. I've heard Kubernetes is the default way now. It has become the default way,
popular,
and now we're basically starting to determine what the mesh manager is, right? Which is really just it's like a manager of your services, right?
Yeah.
Service mesh. There you go. Service mesh management. And you're going to VMworld. You have you have a code session at VMworld Europe that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's also out on I think code.vmware.com because the one we did in US we videotaped, live streamed it, and it's out there. So if you're interested in seeing her session, you can go to the Code YouTube channel, and we have that up there, and you can watch the whole session, or you can come to VMworld Europe and hang out and stand, because I think we got standing room mostly. I think there are a couple sessions that have some space left, and there's always seats because people don't show up. So come by the code booth. We are in the village, which is in the main reg area. If you were there last year, same place. We're going to be same place. It's a great place to be. Should be fun. Come by and see Boskey and say hello. Tell you heard it on the podcast, and you get a special free gift.
VMware Code is fun.
A handshake.
Tell her at the hackathon you'll get 1 extra point.
Yeah, exactly.
Project.
Yeah, and you'll be at the hackathon on Monday night, so that should be fun. Buses are included.
Food is included.
Food is included, and it's going to be a nice
people are
venue. So
included.
should be there. And keep writing code and learning. It's actually exciting. I like it all. And for those of you who think that I have a new Mac, I don't. I'm still running on a 2012 MacBook Pro 13-inch with a CD-ROM drive in it because I refuse to upgrade. But I might upgrade. I'm just dressing Graham on the chat.
Best.
Yeah, they still are the best. Although with dark mode now and the new machines, I might upgrade. You never know. It's fun to have you, Boskey, in the room, and we'll be in Europe together. So can't wait to be there again. And
48 hours.
As always, Cloud Native is on the edge, and I know people ask me why are we talking about Cloud Native when all I'm running is vSphere, and the answer is because I don't need to do a podcast on vSphere. You guys all know all about it already. So, but it's fun to get the cool things that are changing our perspectives and changing who VMware is slowly over time, and that's important to do because we got to stay on the edge. So, thanks for coming in. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being out there working on it. So, with that, anybody have anything you want to share with regards to barbecue? I am making pumpkin seeds tonight, so I carved pumpkins.
Ooh.
We got our Halloween ears on today out on the live stream, and we are going to. I will do some barbecue pumpkin seeds. If you've never made pumpkin seeds, just put them on a tray, wash them good, and put them on a tray. put some salt on them, and then just put some olive oil on them, put them in a cookie sheet, put them in the oven, cook them for like 15 minutes till they go golden brown. Maybe I'll put some barbecue sauce on a few just so I can say I did it. Happy Halloween, everybody, and we will be in Europe. We're going to try to record a podcast there. We won't be live because of the time zone change, but we will try to record a podcast, do some interviews, and let everybody know how it's going. And yeah, there you go. So we'll be there. And if you're thinking about, you should come to AWS reInvent if you can get a cheap ticket to Vegas. If you're in the U.S., come by, say hello. We'll be hanging out there as well. Get a free cup of coffee. And if you're not going to do anything, you can just make some cool Raspberry Pi sensor stuff that uploads the data. And maybe we'll get a Kubernetes engine to manage some of it too.
I didn't get a chance to do that in US. I'm looking forward to doing that.
It's a lot of fun having a good time with it. And Bill Roth with Wavefront, the data visualization. I got that up and running now. That's pretty cool. So we'll see everybody there. And until then, have a great week.
Right. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. All right. Now we just have to get TalkShoe to say goodbye.
Recording